Hello everybody, happy almost new year. I'm gonna waste no time telling you the 5 worst books that I read in 2022. If you love these books, continue loving these books. We're coming at each book with different perspectives, we have different reading histories. It's fine to love a book I hate, and it's fine for me to hate a book you love. I'm going to record the best books that I read in 2022 after this. So we're gonna start with the bad news and then finish with the good news. So after you watch this, you can go ahead and watch the best books that I read this year. All of the books that are gonna be in this video, I had such high hopes for. I was really excited. They were widely recommended to me. Ranked in number 5 for worst books I read this year is 3 Women by Lisa Taddeo. I was so excited for this book. It's my first book by her. I really am still inspired to read Animal by her as well. This is the story that follows 3 women. The first woman is uncovering the long-term effects of having a romance with her teacher.
Not romance, grooming, abuse. But when you're young, you're confused.
The second woman is in a bit of a loveless, sexless marriage and is fiending for a crush of hers outside of her marriage. And then the third woman, who I found to be the most interesting, was living in, I believe, Newport or Nantucket, one or the other. Bright, brilliant, beautiful, sexual. Some of her sexual endeavors that she's had in her relationship, and you follow the lives of them. There wasn't enough resolution in it for me. I wanted more. I felt like we were scratching at the surface but didn't get deep enough for me to care. There was no real progression. The arc was small, you know? Sometimes you really feel the movement of the character development. I didn't think that there was a lot of it. It felt like I put binoculars on 3 women's lives, and maybe that's the point of it, which is totally fine. I put 3 binoculars on 3 different women's lives, and I watched for a chunk of time and then just put the binoculars down and went about my life. I kind of only saw myself in one of them slightly, and none of them were interesting enough for me to continue caring. As I said, there was only one woman that I really cared about her story, so I felt myself kind of being bored during 2 of the women. And then when I got to hers, I read through it too quickly, but even still, once I got to the end of her story, I simply wasn't riveted, and I haven't really thought about the book since. It disappointed me. If you read it too and you felt the same way, that's kind of what my purpose of this video is for. It's for like the people who read these books with such high expectations and then were left confused by why everyone loved them so much. So that's ranked number 5. Number 4, The Girls, Emma Cline. Oh my god, the premise for this book: you're in Northern California during the 60s, you have this hippie sex cult going on, and this girl who's looking at it from a distance and so badly wants to be a part of it and then gets to be a part of it. That's the premise for an interesting book. I was so excited. I got into it and I was very curious about where things were going, but similar to 3 Women, it felt like the story didn't get intense enough. There were intense moments, but there was a lot of filler and fluff in this, I felt, and there could have been a lot more that you could have fit into these pages. It's dark, intense, and reflective, but not as dark or tense as reflective as I'd want it to be. It's also adventurous, but not adventurous enough. There is a lot of adventure to it, but the details were being held back from me. It felt like only a few chapters really gave me the nitty-gritty details that I was hoping for, and I left this book being disappointed because I wanted more from it. Number 3, My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This I saw all over TikTok. It's been on my to-be read for such a long time, and I'm learning that I need to be a bit cautious when it comes to taking TikTok recommendations, because the top 3 in this video are all TikTok recommendations that people spoke about so highly and so widely. And this is the story of Vanessa, and she goes to a boarding school in Maine and develops a little bit of a crush on her teacher, her English teacher, and they end up having an affair together. This book goes back and forth between her time in boarding school when their relationship is developing and present day when she's grappling with, is this my love story or was I groomed and abused? And her trying to navigate this of wanting to believe the story that she that leaves her feeling happier and kind of facing the truth. I didn't like this book because, ultimately because I read this book first, Consent by Vanessa Springora, and this is also a grooming story that takes place in France with, weird that they both have Vanessa in it. Interesting. Okay. I read this last year, so I don't remember her. Oh my god, her name is Vanessa. There's no way. There's no way. I wonder if these books have been compared a lot. I read this book and I felt it, you know? Whereas this book, I was angry and I felt it. This just seemed much more well done. And Vanessa's so unlikable. Sorry. And also, what's his name? Strain. He's everybody's unlikable. I didn't like anyone. Her parents are like whatever, I guess, which is what makes me want to continue reading and fall so in love with the book, because they weren't charmingly unlikable, they were just kind of unlikable. Everyone was a little bit unlikable. Sorry. This got number 3. Number 2 is a book that has been on my list for just as long as my Dark Vanessa, and I can't believe how stupid it was. It's a thriller novel that as soon as I hold it up, I'm sure a lot of you have read it, it was so bad. There are so many better books of this format out there. I don't know why this is the one that we're harping on. The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is so stupid. All right, so let me give you the premise because it sounds really interesting, right? So we have Alicia, she's this sexy, gorgeous artist with long, beautiful red hair, and then she has her husband Gabriel, who's just as sexy, and they're this hot, loving, young couple that seems perfect until she kills him. Why did she kill him? We don't know. She's put in an insane asylum, or a, what are they called? Like a psych ward. She's put in a psych ward and she's not speaking. She's silent. And then we meet, what's his name? Theo, the criminal psychotherapist Theo, and he hears about her case and he's like, I want to know. I want to crack the case. I want to know why she's silent. I want to make her talk. Let's get her to admit to this. Let's figure out the story. And so you're going back and forth with his detective work. He's not just being a therapist, he's being a detective. He's trying to figure out the clues. And then finally, when you get to the end, you're like, come on. That was a little too predictable and not satisfying. The initial storyline is interesting, and they took it in a way that was so cliche, boring. Ugh. I picked up, what was it called? Behind Closed Doors. I found that on a stoop one day when I was living in New York, and I picked that up, and that was a better version of this. This is so stupid. Made me angry. The worst book I read this year actively makes me angry when I think about it, because I was so excited, okay? And this book was, maybe I don't understand these books. Maybe these worst books that I read, I didn't get what I was supposed to get, or I'm not the right audience for it, or whatever. But this #1 book in particular, the worst book I read this year, was in these collections of recommendations with other books that I really liked. Like, this was often in the same category with The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and I think that's one of the best books I've ever read. The worst book I read this year is a novel by Chelsea G. Summers called A Certain Hunger. This book follows a protagonist woman named Dorothy, and she loves sex, loves food, and combines the two of them in a way that's so corny, so cheesy. She's very, very smart. Okay, so like someone who's brilliant and sexy and interesting, like that's one of my favorite kind of protagonists. So when I heard about that, I was like, great, this was up my alley. I don't know why this book is so highly recommended. The only way I could see myself liking it is if I read it when I was in middle school. But being a 26-year-old woman now reading this book is, no, do better, do better. I tried so hard to finish this book. I couldn't stand reading it. I ended up having to buy it on Audible so I could listen to it while I was doing other things, which is even worse because that means I bought this book twice. And I would like to do that for books I love, not books I hate, but let me just did anyone else read this? I want to know, did anyone else read any of these? And you're like, I don't understand the hype. I don't understand it. Pretend that 3 Women's in it. I don't know where I put it. I feel like maybe I left it in New York when I moved because I just knew that I wouldn't read it again. These didn't do anything for me except for make me a little irritated. And I was so ultimately disappointed. These, maybe instead of calling them the 5 worst books that I read this year, the 5 books that disappointed me the most this year could be maybe a better way of framing it. I would love to know what you think of these books, if you enjoyed them thoroughly, if I'm missing something. You can call me out. We can get a little feisty in the comments if we so please. And if you're interested in learning the best books that I read this year, if it's not on my channel already, subscribe and you will be notified. And if it is on my channel, just start watching it now and we can go from bad news to good news. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all the things. And I have a podcast called the @Lexi Podcast if you're looking for more content. That's all. Talk to you guys later.